This is the Happy Families podcast with Dr. Justin Coulson. We're Luke and Susie, and this is the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Parenting is so easy, right? Talking to your kids is a breeze. I've experienced a couple of situations with this recently where, as an adult, having a conversation with our children, we've got an 8-year-old and 2 6-year-olds, where I was caught between, like, how much do I... Like, one of them was about discipline, and one of them was about, whether I was arbitrary with them, and they thought that I was just being mean for the sake of being mean, and the other one, they wanted to walk a long distance without parental supervision, and I was caught between telling them about the dangers of a child of 8 years old being by themselves versus not wanting to scare him unnecessarily of the dangers of the world. And it suddenly, all of this happened in a couple of days, and I realised how difficult a balance it is to talk to our children about adult things in a way that gives them respect and teaches and makes us not seem like arbitrary, idiots, but at the same point, not forcing him to have to try and understand adult concepts.
Yeah.
And how do I navigate those conversations? Dr. Justin Coulson from happyfamilies.com.au. Please tell me how to talk to my children.
Softly, quietly, with love, with compassion. This is such a hard one because we want them to maintain their innocence. We want them to be creative and to be curious and to explore. And then we say, oh, but by the way, if you get curious and explore over there, something bad's going to happen to you.
And we know, and we've talked about this previously, the likelihood or the stats of something bad happening are very, very low. But as an adult, and it's our job as a parent to be acutely aware of that small percentage of likelihood, but we don't want to freak them out about it. But at the same point, one of the things we do is, I find myself trying not to do it, but when we're having a conversation with kids, our default, our catch-all is, because I said so.
It's funny because the stats might be extraordinarily small, but when it happens to you, the stats don't matter.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Which is what scares us.
That's exactly why we get so worried about it. The likelihood of something bad happening is tiny.
Yeah.
But if it does, it's going to shake our world in such significant ways. Look, I think that one of the things that we want to do is be really clean and clear in our conversation. So let's take the whole walking to school scenario. Yeah. You want to walk to school, you're 8 years old. As a parent, you want to encourage your kids to do this, but at the same time, they need to be aware that it's not necessarily safe for them to do that. And here's why. And we don't need to go into detail, but we do need to say there are some people who have bad ideas. They're very unusual. They're very rare. We hardly ever hear about them we don't even... The problem is we don't know who they are. Yeah. And therefore, we're concerned for your safety and well-being. And then we look for ways that we can set them up for success. So we might find that they've got 2 or 3 friends who live nearby who can all walk with them. And they can all meet at one person's house and off they go. Or they can promise you that they'll ride their bike really, really, really fast, which obviously we're probably not going to let them get away with. But, it's about having that conversation and exploring options with them because we want them to have that opportunity. A couple of years ago, there was a lady called Lenore Skenazy. She let her 9-year-old ride the subway home in New York alone. And she wrote a book called Free Range Parenting about it. Now, she was criticised globally for a decision to let a 9-year-old boy ride the New York subway on his own. Yeah. I don't have an opinion about it because I don't know the context. I don't know the time of day. Did she do it at 11 p.m? Probably not. Is he a big kid for his age? Maybe, maybe not. The point is she made an educated adult guess that he was probably going to be okay, and he was. And then she wrote about it and she, made $1 million out of it. Good for her. Would you do that for your kids? Would you let them do that? Are you okay with them walking that far to school on their own? And let me ask you this question. You might say yes to your son. What would you say to your daughter?
Yeah.
And then how do you explain to your children why, if your answer is different, why that answer is different? We need to be able to have that conversation. Now, I can't tell you what to say because every family and every neighbourhood and every school and every child is different. But we do need to have the conversations. It's the same with sleepovers. Your kids want to go to a sleepover. Maybe you've got one of those rules that says kids don't have sleepovers because you or a friend was harmed at a sleepover or exposed to something that shouldn't have happened. And so you want to protect your kids. And so, again, you make it really clear. At this point, we don't believe that you're old enough. Here's why. And we provide a really clear rationale. Now, sometimes kid's going to be really upset with that, and they're going to put pressure on you. You cry and whimper and moan and mumble and groan and tell you how horrible you are and write horrible things and leave letters that say, I hate my parents. Because kids do that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
This is their life, and they care so much about having the freedom. And at that point, we need to say, well, how do we protect you? How do we make sure you're okay? And we might actually negotiate with them depending on how old they are, or we might simply say no because we're the parent. If you were to draw two circles overlapping, we call that a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
And draw these two circles with your kids, and in one of them write parent decisions, and the other one write child decisions. And then the bit where they overlap, you draw an arrow into that pit, that part, and you say, decisions we negotiate.
Yeah.
And then you have a conversation with the kids. You say, you know what, sometimes parents just make decisions, and all the things that we decide on, they go in this circle right here. You might even get them to tell you what some of those things are.
Yeah.
What you eat, what school you go to, what time you go to bed, for example.
Yeah.
Whether you walk to school, whether you go to sleepover parties. And then in kids' decisions, we say, but you know what, we want you to make lots of decisions for yourself. Can you think of any decisions you're allowed to make? And so you write them all there. And then you say, and now we've got these ones that we can negotiate. And over time, those circles change shape and size. And the kids get to make more and more decisions, and the negotiation space changes as well. And we talk our kids through that. Now, at some point, we might say, because of what you're asking, let's have a look at which circle it goes in. Oh, look at that. It's a parent decision. This is my decision. This is why I've decided it. And because I said so is not a decision, not a reason, by the way.
Exactly.
You can't say because I said so. You've got to explain why.
Yeah.
And then you leave it there. You say, that's just the way it is. Yeah. Other times you'll say, you know what, I don't care. You decide.
Yep.
And then you negotiate.
As a manager in a workplace, in an office, one of the things I got taught very early on is arbitrary communication and decisions from a manager is the most destructive thing to the team. Because as soon as they sort of grasp that you make random wild decisions that make no sense whatsoever, you've lost them. And I learnt that the power of sitting down with someone, even if you can't give them detail, but give them the respect of I can't tell you all the reasons why I had to make that decision, and I hope you understand that, but there's confidentialities involved. But no, I understand your point. I understand it doesn't look like it makes sense to you, but I need to make this, like, even just as simple as that. You've said nothing more, but you've given them a respect to have a conversation, to honour that it doesn't make sense to them. And I learnt that as a manager, that as best you can, give explanation and give the respect of a conversation. And your team then follows you, sometimes blindly, because they trust that you're taking everything into account. And trying to apply that to my parenting in the same way, to go, even if they're 8 years old and 6 years old and don't understand it, to give them a respect of a conversation. And then there's a point where you go, I know you're not going to understand this, but this is in the parent decision column, so you're just going to have to go with it. Like, I've found that when I'm calm enough to go through that conversation, usually they come out the other side pretty quickly and easily.
And Susie, that's the key. Luke's just said it. When I'm calm enough to have... Because what happens is our kids have got so much energy. They've got far more energy to argue about something that they want than we have energy to argue back about why we should say no.
Yeah.
And so as parents, we just say, oh, look, for goodness sakes, I've had enough. Whatever. Do whatever you want. I'm tired of arguing about it.
Yeah.
Because they just win on energy. The whole pester power thing.
Yeah.
Teenagers are the worst for that. But if we can step back from the emotion of it, take the energy out of it, and just have that frank conversation where we validate their feelings and say, but this is a parent decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Or we might say, now that I see things the way you've explained them, maybe we should negotiate this instead. I have 3 E's of effective discipline. It's kind of the same thing, but going up another level. Explain, explore, empower. We explain what we want and why.
Yeah.
We explore how they feel. And then if we can negotiate it, we actually empower them to come up with a decision.
Yeah.
I think I've shared the story about my daughter who wanted Snapchat. And I explained all the reasons I didn't want her to have it. And then she said, but Dad, I've been to your seminars, and while they're good reasons, I know that now you've got to explore why I want it. This is the problem with being a parenting expert and bringing your kids to this. And so I said to her, sure, let me explore that. And she told me her reasons. All my friends are on it, which means 2 of her friends are on it. And I don't want to be the only one that hasn't got it because all my friends are on it. And I said, well, all your friends are on Facebook. Just talk to them there. I've explored, and I'm going back to my explanation. Just use Facebook. And she was really great. She said, Dad, you haven't explored properly. You've closed your mind. And I said, well, open my mind. Help me to understand. And she said, you telling me to be on Facebook while all my friends are on Snapchat is like you telling me to go to the park while all my friends are at the beach. I was like, wow, that's... all of a sudden, just like you, Luke, I went, And it opened up my eyes a little bit. I actually was able to explore. I saw the world through her eyes.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, golly, that's good. And so then I said to her, there's a problem with that, though, because at the beach there are rips and sweeps and currents, and there are sharks and stingers, and there are syringes in the sand, and there's sun. You're going to get sunburnt, and there's perverts. And she said, Dad, have you been to the park lately? And she was
She's
right.
good. She's good.
Facebook and Instagram are not exactly the safest places to be.
Yeah.
And
So you banned her from Facebook?
Not the consequence she was after.
and so I said to her, now that genie was out of the bottle. I said to her, okay, well, I've explained and now we've explored, so I guess we need to move to empower. And while she didn't use these words, I'm extending the metaphor and putting words in her mouth now. But she basically said, Dad, if I go to the beach, I promise I'll wear a sun shirt and a sun hat, and I promise I'll put lots of sunscreen on, and I'll just play in the rock pools.
Yeah.
She came up with some guidelines for her use of Snapchat that were completely acceptable to me, and so we were able to say yes. And so that's a long way of answering your question, Luke. But what we're really doing here is we're working with our kids rather than arbitrarily doing things to them, whether it's walking to school or whether it's going to the sleepover, it's using social media, whatever the issue is, we work out whether it's my decision, your decision, or our decision, and then we explain, explore, empower.
Which I love, because even with our 8-year-old, I can see those conversations where, in a sense, accidentally we fell upon that with the walking to school thing, where I picked him up that afternoon and he said, can I at least walk to the corner at the service station and you pick me up from there? And I went, you know what? I can see it. It's controlled. There's a lot of other kids. I can feel comfortable enough to give him some leeway. And he was empowered to feel like he was independent and on his own, where I thought the risk factor was so low, I was willing to make that call. And we met that middle ground because he engaged with understanding, okay, I'm not going to win this one with Dad, but can you give me a little bit?
The camel sticking its nose into the tent in the desert. You know what else you could do, though, is you could just buy a drone.
Yes.
Fly it over his head and follow him all the way to school.
And attach a leash to him, which the drone keeps loose most of the time. If there's any danger, then the drone just goes up and lifts him out of danger. That'd be great. Just watch out for the power lines, right?
That's right.
Oh, such a good thing to explore these conversations. I've got Venn diagrams galore in my head at the moment. Dr. Justin Coulson from happyfamilies.com.au. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome to be with you.
Susie's got the Olympic rings.
You can certainly find some more resources available to help you in your parenting journey at happyfamilies.com.au. If Dr. Justin Coulson is someone that you'd be interested in having speak at your community event or organisation, you can find those details at justincoulson.com.